My name is Isabella Morgan, 23, and I had always believed family meant unconditional love and trust. That illusion shattered during my graduation dinner at Rosewood Steakhouse when my grandmother Elaine casually mentioned the $3,000 she'd sent to help with my tuition. The table fell silent as I stared at her in genuine confusion. "What money, Grandma?" The color drained from my mother's face while my sister Paige suddenly became intensely interested in her napkin. That dinner revealed a family-wide conspiracy that would ultimately cost someone everything. I still remember the heaviness in my chest as I looked around that table, seeing the truth dawn on me like a slow, painful sunrise. If you've ever felt that sickening moment when family betrayal hits you, you know exactly what I mean. Before I continue with how this shocking revelation unfolded, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Each time I share this story, I'm amazed by how many people have experienced similar family deceptions. Drop a like if you've ever discovered a family secret at the worst possible moment, and subscribe if you want more stories about how I navigated the complicated aftermath of what happened next. To understand the magnitude of what happened that night, you need to know a bit about my family. I grew up in Somerset, Connecticut, in what I always thought was a typical middle-class family. Our house wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable enough in a nice neighborhood with good schools. My parents, Diana and Richard Morgan, divorced when I was 14 after my dad had an emotional affair with a coworker. It wasn't physical, at least that's what he claimed, but the damage was done. The divorce was messy, with my mother painting herself as the heartbroken victim who would now struggle to raise two daughters alone. My older sister Paige is 26, 3 years older than me, and has always been the golden child of the family. With her perfect blonde hair, dazzling smile, and outgoing personality, she was the beauty queen who won pageants from the time she could walk. My mother adored her, showing up to every competition and social event, beaming with pride as Paige charmed everyone around her. Then there was me, the quiet, studious one with my nose always in a book. I preferred the company of my thoughts to large social gatherings. While I wasn't exactly ignored, I had definitely lived in Paige's shadow. My achievements were acknowledged, but never celebrated with the same enthusiasm as my sisters. A science fair trophy didn't quite compare to a beauty queen crown in my mother's eyes. The one person who always saw me was my grandmother Elaine, my mother's mother. After my grandfather passed away 10 years ago, Grandma threw herself into building a successful real estate business. She became quite wealthy in her own right, owning several commercial properties around Connecticut. While my mother and Grandma Elaine had a strained relationship for reasons I never fully understood, Grandma and I were incredibly close. She was the one who attended my debate competitions and science fairs when my mother was busy with Paige's pageants. She was the one who told me my brain would take me further than any beauty crown ever could. When I got accepted to Westlake University to study biology on the pre-med track, Grandma Elaine was the first person I called. I still remember her excited voice on the phone. "I always knew you were destined for greatness, Isabella." My mother's reaction was more subdued. "That's nice, honey, but Westlake is expensive. Are you sure you want to take on that much debt?" College was indeed expensive, and despite receiving a partial academic scholarship, I still needed significant financial assistance. My mother repeatedly told me that money was tight since the divorce, despite the generous alimony and child support my father provided. I took out student loans to cover tuition, but the day-to-day expenses of college life were a constant struggle. Throughout my 4 years at Westlake, I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the week, I worked at the campus library shelving books and helping students with research. On weekends, I waitressed at a local restaurant called Mason's Grill, often pulling double shifts that left me exhausted, but with enough tip money to buy groceries for the week. I can't count the number of times I survived on ramen noodles and coffee just to afford the ridiculously overpriced textbooks required for my courses. Sophomore year was particularly rough. My ancient Honda Civic, a 16th birthday gift from my grandparents, broke down completely. Without transportation, I nearly had to drop out since I couldn't get to my off-campus job. I called my mother in tears, asking if she could help with repairs. "I just don't have it right now, Isabella," she said with a sigh. Your sister's pageant coaching is eating up all my extra cash, and you know how important this Miss Connecticut competition is for her future. Can't you ask one of your friends for rides? When I suggested maybe Paige could postpone some coaching sessions until next month, the conversation turned icy. Your sister has real potential, Isabella. These opportunities don't wait around. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do. I didn't tell my mother, but I ended up calling Grandma Elaine about the car. She immediately offered to help, saying, "Your education is the priority, Isabella. I'll send you money for the repairs this week." True to her word, she wired me enough to get the car fixed, allowing me to keep my job and stay in school. This pattern continued throughout college. Whenever I asked my mother for financial help, for an unexpected medical bill, research materials, or even professional clothes for internship interviews, the answer was always the same. Money was tight, she was doing her best, and I should understand how expensive it was to maintain our family home now that she was single. Yet somehow, there was always money for Paige's pageant dresses, coaching sessions, and eventually, her lavish wedding to her college boyfriend. During those difficult years, my grandmother would frequently assure me that she wanted to help with my college expenses. "I believe in investing in education," she would say during our weekly phone calls. "Just let me know what you need." She would occasionally mention sending checks, but I never received them. When I brought this up once, she seemed confused but didn't push the issue, and I assumed she was just getting a bit forgetful as she approached her 70s. Despite all the financial hardships, I thrived academically. I graduated magna cum laude with my biology degree, with acceptance to medical school already secured for the fall. The graduation dinner at Rosewood Steakhouse was supposed to be a celebration of this achievement, the first time our whole family had been together in years. My father flew in from Chicago, where he now lived, with his new wife. Paige and her husband drove down from Boston. Even some extended family members made appearances. I was excited but anxious about the future. Medical school would mean even more debt, more years of financial struggle. But it was my dream, and I was determined to make it work somehow. I had no idea that the truth revealed at that dinner would change everything I thought I knew about my family and the years of struggle I had endured. The graduation dinner at Rosewood Steakhouse was meant to be the highlight of my achievement, a rare moment when my accomplishments would be the center of attention. The restaurant was upscale, with dark wood paneling, crisp white tablecloths, and the kind of prices that made me wince when I glanced at the menu. Everyone was dressed up for the occasion. My mother wore her favorite navy blue dress with pearl earrings, while Paige looked stunning as always in a fitted red cocktail dress. My father and his new wife Beth sat somewhat awkwardly across from my mother, making stilted conversation about the weather and traffic. Grandma Elaine arrived fashionably late, elegant in a cream-colored pantsuit with her silver hair perfectly styled. She hugged me tightly before taking her seat beside me. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, my brilliant girl," she whispered. The dinner proceeded pleasantly enough through appetizers and main courses. My father raised a toast to my academic achievements, and even my mother seemed genuinely proud as she clinked her glass against mine. It wasn't until dessert was served that everything fell apart. Grandma Elaine was asking about my plans for medical school when she casually said, "I hope the $3,000 I sent helped ease some of the financial burden this past year. I know textbooks are highway robbery these days." The table fell silent. I looked at her in confusion. "What money, Grandma?" Elaine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "The money I sent you. The 6 checks for $500 each over the past 3 years. I shook my head slowly. "I never received any checks from you." My mother jumped in quickly, her voice overly cheerful. "Mom, this isn't the time to discuss financial matters. We're celebrating Isabella's graduation." But Grandma Elaine was not so easily deterred. She put down her fork and turned to face my mother. "Diana, what is going on? I sent Isabella's 6 checks through you because you said her college mailbox wasn't secure. You told me you were giving them to her." The color drained from my mother's face. Beside her, Paige suddenly became intensely interested in rearranging her napkin on her lap. There must be some misunderstanding, my mother said weakly. Perhaps you forgot to send them? Grandma Elaine's expression hardened. She reached for her handbag and pulled out her smartphone. For a woman in her 70s, my grandmother was remarkably tech-savvy, particularly when it came to tracking her finances. After a few moments of scrolling, she turned the phone around to show a banking app display. There's no misunderstanding, Diana. Here are the records. 6 checks made out to Isabella Morgan, all endorsed and deposited. The last one was cashed just 3 months ago. My father leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Diana, what is this about? The restaurant seemed to grow quieter around us, though it was likely just the blood rushing in my ears. I felt a strange detachment, as though I were watching the scene unfold from somewhere outside my body. I'm sure there's a simple explanation, my mother said, her voice rising slightly. I must have put them aside for safekeeping and forgotten to tell Isabella. For 3 years? Grandma Elaine asked incredulously. And you just happened to cash all of them? My mother's face flushed. I was going to give her the money. Things have been tight since Richard left us, and I left you with a generous alimony and child support arrangement. My father interrupted, his voice cold. Don't try to blame this on me, Diana. The truth was dawning on me with sickening clarity. You took money that was meant for me, I said quietly. Money that could have helped me when I was working double shifts and barely sleeping just to stay in school. Isabella, you don't understand, my mother began, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. Then explain it to me, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Explain why I ate ramen for dinner for weeks while you apparently cashed checks meant for my education. I meant to tell you, she insisted. But the timing was never right, and the timing wasn't right for 3 years. My grandmother cut in, her voice sharp with anger. Diana, I trusted you to pass those checks along to your daughter. The confrontation escalated quickly. My father demanded to know what else my mother had been hiding. Paige stared at her plate in silence. Other diners were beginning to glance our way, attracted by the tension at our table. I couldn't bear it anymore. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need some air, I mumbled, grabbing my purse and heading for the door without waiting for a response. Outside in the parking lot, the cool evening air did little to clear my head. I leaned against the brick wall of the restaurant, trying to process what I'd just learned. The door opened behind me, and I turned to see Paige approaching hesitantly. Bella, wait, she called, using my childhood nickname. Please don't leave like this. Did you know? I asked her directly. Did you know Mom was taking money from Grandma that was meant for me? Paige couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. How could you? I whispered. You knew I was struggling. You knew I was working myself to exhaustion. It's more complicated than you think, Paige said, finally looking up. Her eyes were filled with tears. There's more to it than what came out in there. What do you mean, more to it? I demanded. She glanced back at the restaurant nervously. I can't talk about it here. Mom would. She stopped herself. Just call me tomorrow, okay? There are things you should know. I didn't respond, just pushed myself away from the wall and walked to my car. As I drove home to my small off-campus apartment, my mind was reeling. The graduation dinner that should have been a celebration of my achievements had instead revealed a betrayal I couldn't have imagined. And according to Paige, what came to light at dinner was only the tip of the iceberg. I barely slept that night, my mind churning with questions and hurt. By morning, I was determined to understand the full scope of what had happened. I called Grandma Elaine early, asking if I could come over to talk. She agreed immediately. Grandma's house was a beautiful Victorian in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. When I arrived, she was waiting for me with coffee and fresh-baked scones. Stress baking was her therapy. But food was the last thing on my mind. I want to know everything, I told her as we sat in her sunroom overlooking her meticulously maintained garden. Every penny you sent that I never received. Grandma Elaine nodded grimly and retrieved a leather portfolio from her study. Inside was a detailed record of her financial transactions over the past 4 years. What I saw made my stomach drop. $12,000? I gasped, staring at the spreadsheet she'd printed out. You sent me $12,000? $3,000 a year since you started college, she confirmed. Always through your mother because she insisted your campus mail wasn't secure. She said she was handing the checks directly to you. The betrayal cut even deeper than I had imagined. $12,000 would have changed everything about my college experience. I could have worked one job instead of two. I could have afforded proper nutrition instead of surviving on ramen and coffee. I could have bought a reliable car instead of constantly repairing my old one. There's more, Grandma said gently. I also sent birthday and Christmas checks each year. $500 each time. Did you ever receive those? I shook my head numbly. Another $4,000 I never saw. After leaving Grandma's house with copies of all her financial records, I called my mother. The conversation was brief and unsatisfying. Diana continued to claim she had meant to give me the money but needed it for household expenses and had always intended to pay it back somehow. How could you do this to me? I asked, my voice breaking. Do you have any idea how much I struggled? You don't understand what it's like to maintain a household on a single income, she deflected. Your sister needed. Don't bring Paige into this, I interrupted. This is about you stealing money that was meant for me. I didn't steal it. I'm your mother. I was managing family finances the best I could. After hanging up, I made a decision that felt both wrong and necessary. I drove to my mother's house. Using the spare key she didn't know, I still had to let myself in while she was at work. What I was looking for, I wasn't entirely sure. Some explanation, perhaps, or evidence that the money had indeed gone to critical household expenses as she claimed. What I found instead was damning. In her closet were shopping bags from high-end retailers containing items still with tags, designer handbags, shoes, clothing. In her desk drawer, I found receipts for spa weekends and expensive restaurants dated within days of when Grandma's checks had been deposited. This wasn't about survival, it was about luxury. Even worse, I found photos on her bulletin board of her and Paige on shopping sprees at spa days and at expensive restaurants. All time-stamped around the dates when Grandma's checks were cashed. The betrayal wasn't just my mother's. My sister had been complicit, benefiting directly from money meant for my education. In the home office, I found financial statements for a joint account between my mother and Paige that I had never known existed. Going through the transaction history, I could see deposits matching the amounts of Grandma's checks, followed by withdrawals split between them. They had been systematically stealing from me and sharing the proceeds. My hands shaking, I took photos of everything with my phone before carefully replacing everything exactly as I'd found it. Then I drove straight to Paige's apartment across town. When she opened the door, her expression told me she knew why I was there. You went through Mom's things, didn't you? I found the joint account, Paige. I saw the photos. I saw everything. She let me in, sinking onto her couch with her head in her hands. I knew this would all come out eventually. How could you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. You're my sister. Paige looked up, her eyes red. Do you have any idea what it's like to live in your shadow? All my life, it's been Isabella is so smart. Isabella has such potential. Isabella is going to change the world. What about me? What about what I wanted? So you stole from me? Money I desperately needed while I was working 2 jobs and barely sleeping. Tears streamed down her face. Mom convinced me it was fair. She said Grandma always favored you, that she never supported my pageants or modeling the way she supported your education. She said we deserved something too. That's not true, I said, stunned by this revelation. Grandma offered to help with your college tuition too, but you chose pageants instead. Mom said Grandma never offered, Paige admitted quietly. She told me Grandma thought my pageants were frivolous and wouldn't help. The manipulation ran deeper than I'd imagined. My mother had turned Paige against Grandma and justified their theft by painting herself and Paige as somehow deserving of compensation for perceived favoritism. Over the next several days, I uncovered more deceptions. I learned from extended family members that my mother had told them I didn't need financial help because I had full scholarships that covered everything. She had intercepted graduation checks from relatives, birthday money from distant aunts and uncles, all while maintaining the fiction that I was financially secure. The most painful discovery came when I found childhood pageant winnings that should have been in my name. When I was 8, before I decided competitions weren't for me, I had won a regional pageant with a $500 prize. That money had supposedly been put into a savings account for my future. I now realized my mother had likely taken that too. The picture that emerged was clear and devastating. For my entire life, my mother had systematically diverted financial support meant for me to herself and Paige, while allowing me to believe that I was on my own. The weeks following these revelations were among the most difficult of my life. The psychological impact of such betrayal was profound. I found myself questioning every childhood memory, wondering what else had been a lie. I developed insomnia, lying awake analyzing past conversations for clues I might have missed. Most painfully, I began to question my own worth. If my own mother and sister could so callously steal from me while watching me struggle, did that mean I somehow deserve it? As news of what had happened spread through the family, people began taking sides. Some relatives, particularly on my mother's side, defended her actions. Diana did the best she could as a single mom. My Aunt Patricia insisted during an uncomfortable phone call. You don't understand the pressure she was under. Others were firmly in my corner. My father, after learning the full extent of the deception, was livid. This doesn't surprise me, he told me during a long lunch at a quiet cafe. Diana did similar things during our marriage. There were always missing funds, expenses that couldn't be explained. When I questioned her, she would turn it around and accuse me of not trusting her. My relationship with Paige was essentially destroyed. Though she claimed remorse, she continued to live in the apartment our mother helped pay for, drive the car our mother had helped purchase, likely with money meant for me. We went from speaking several times a week to complete silence. The sister I had grown up with, shared secrets with, and loved despite living in her shadow, now felt like a stranger. My mother's response to being caught was particularly disturbing. Rather than genuine remorse, she shifted into victim mode, telling family members that I was blowing things out of proportion and turning everyone against her over a misunderstanding about money. She sent me manipulative text messages alternating between guilt trips and anger. After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By turning your grandmother against me? Family should mean more than money. I can't believe you're willing to destroy our relationship over this. You've always been selfish, only thinking about yourself. What about what Paige and I needed all these years? The gaslighting was so extreme that I began to question my own reactions. Was I overreacting? Was family harmony worth more than the money that had been stolen from me? It took my therapist, whom I started seeing to help process the trauma, to reassure me that my feelings were valid and my mother's behavior was textbook narcissistic deflection. The situation came to a head when Diana showed up unannounced at my apartment one evening. I had just returned from a long shift at the restaurant where I was still working to save money for medical school. I opened the door to find her standing there with a small gift bag, as if this were a normal visit. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into my apartment before I could object. "This has gone on long enough." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, leaving the door open in a not-so-subtle hint that this wouldn't be a long conversation. "I brought you something," she said, holding out the gift bag. Inside was a check for $1,000. "This is a start. I want to make things right." "A start?" I repeated incredulously. "You stole $16,000 from me over 4 years while I was working myself to exhaustion. And you think $1,000 makes it right?" "I raised you," she snapped, her conciliatory demeanor vanishing instantly. "I put a roof over your head for 18 years. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to raise a child? The sacrifices I made?" "That was your job as a parent," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You chose to have children. I didn't choose to fund your lifestyle while I could barely afford to eat properly. After your father abandoned us." "He didn't abandon us," I interrupted. "He left you." And he paid generous child support and alimony, which you apparently spent on yourself and Paige, while telling me there was no money to help with my education. Her face hardened. You've always been just like your grandmother, looking down on me, judging me. You have no idea what it's like to be a single mother with no support. Get out, I said quietly. Get out of my apartment now. You can't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. A mother doesn't steal from her child, I replied. A mother doesn't watch her daughter work 2 jobs and eat ramen for dinner, while spending that daughter's money on designer handbags. Please leave. After she stormed out, I broke down completely. The confrontation had drained what little emotional energy I had left. I called Grandma Elaine, who came over immediately with food and a shoulder to cry on. Through all of this, my relationship with my grandmother became even stronger. She became my rock, the one person I knew I could trust implicitly. We had long conversations about family dynamics, about my mother's behavior throughout the years, and about how to move forward without letting bitterness consume me. Your mother has always been envious of others, Elaine told me one evening as we sat on my small balcony. Even as a child, she couldn't bear to see her siblings receive anything without demanding the same or better for herself. I should have seen this coming, but I never imagined she would steal from her own daughter. Despite the support from Grandma Elaine and my father, I felt increasingly isolated from family traditions and connections I had once valued. Thanksgiving and Christmas were approaching, and for the first time in my life, I had no idea where or with whom I would spend them. The family I had known was fractured beyond recognition. Meanwhile, my anxiety about medical school intensified. Even with student loans, how would I afford the basic necessities of life during those demanding years of study? The thought of taking on more debt was overwhelming, especially now that I understood how completely alone I had been in my financial struggles. I need to pause here and acknowledge that reliving this part of my story still brings up so many emotions. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. If my story has resonated with you so far and you've experienced something similar, know that you're not alone. The journey through grief and toward healing isn't linear, but as you'll see, sometimes the darkest moments lead to unexpected strength. If you're finding value in my experience, please consider subscribing. There's much more to come about how I managed to find justice without losing myself in bitterness. As the initial shock and hurt began to subside, I found myself facing a crossroads. Part of me wanted to simply cut ties with my mother and sister and move forward with my life. Another part craved accountability, some consequence for the years of deception and theft that had made my college experience so much harder than it needed to be. I reached out to my friend Teresa, who was in her second year of law school, to understand my legal options. Over coffee at a quiet cafe near campus, she explained the harsh reality. The problem is that your mother was likely a joint account holder on any accounts from your childhood, Teresa explained gently. Legally, joint account holders have equal right to the funds, regardless of who the money was intended for. What about the checks from my grandmother that were specifically made out to me? I asked. Teresa sighed. If your mother convinced you to endorse them over to her, or worse, forged your endorsement, that could potentially be check fraud. But it would be difficult to prove after all this time, especially with a parent-child relationship where financial support flows both ways. I left that conversation feeling deflated. It seemed there would be no legal recourse for what had been done to me. That evening, I had dinner with Grandma Elaine at her home. We sat in her elegant dining room, picking at our food without much appetite as we discussed my conversation with Teresa. It's not about the money anymore, I admitted. It's about the principle. She watched me struggle for years while she was spending money meant for me on luxury items. There should be some consequence for that. Grandma Elaine regarded me thoughtfully. There's a difference between revenge and accountability, she said. Revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it can poison you from within. Accountability, on the other hand, is about justice and learning. So what do? I asked, feeling lost. Just forgive and forget. I didn't say that, she replied with a slight smile. I believe in consequences for actions. I'm just suggesting we be strategic rather than reactive. Over the next few weeks, I conducted careful research into my mother's financial situation. Through conversations with family members and some social media sleuthing, I discovered she was planning to purchase a new house, a significant upgrade from our family home. She had been telling relatives about a promotion and substantial bonus that would allow her this luxury. My father, now fully aware of the situation, revealed another crucial piece of information. Diana has always counted on inheriting your grandmother's estate, he told me during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. It's why she maintained some semblance of a relationship with Elaine, even though they never got along. She's been banking on that money for her retirement. Further investigation revealed that my mother had accumulated significant credit card debt over the years, likely from the same spending habits that had led her to misappropriate funds meant for me. The new house, the alleged promotion, all of it seemed to be built on financial quicksand and the expectation of a future inheritance. I arranged a meeting with Grandma Elaine's estate attorney, Mr. Patterson, with her full knowledge and support. The elderly lawyer had managed my grandparents' affairs for decades and was intimately familiar with the family dynamics. Your grandmother has always intended to divide her estate equally between her two children, your mother Diana and your uncle Thomas, Mr. Patterson explained. However, she has complete freedom to change these arrangements if she wishes. I didn't want to pursue criminal charges against my mother. Despite everything, the thought of seeing her arrested or publicly humiliated was too much. But I did want her to face genuine consequences for her actions, consequences that might finally make her understand the gravity of what she had done. Together with Grandma Elaine, I began formulating a plan that would provide accountability without descending into petty revenge. We arranged a strategic planning meeting that included my father, Uncle Thomas, who had been appalled to learn of his sister's actions, and my father's sister, Aunt Margaret. Diana has always been like this, Aunt Margaret confirmed during our discussion around Grandma Elaine's dining room table. Even when you girls were little, she would tell family members that you didn't need birthday money because you were saving for something special, and then she'd pocket it herself. The worst part, Uncle Thomas added, is that she's been telling people Isabella is mentally unstable, that she's exaggerating what happened because she's jealous of Paige. This was news to me and it stung. My own mother was attempting to discredit me rather than take responsibility for her actions. It only strengthened my resolve to ensure there were real consequences. Our plan began to take shape, centered around an upcoming family reunion that Grandma Elaine hosted annually at her estate. This year, it would serve a purpose beyond the usual family gathering. We prepared meticulously, gathering documentation, organizing financial records, and ensuring that every claim we would make could be substantiated with evidence. I wavered at times, wondering if I was becoming as manipulative as my mother in plotting this elaborate response. But as Grandma Elaine reminded me, this isn't about hurting Diana. It's about protecting the family's resources and ensuring they're used as intended. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst behaviors. The day of the family reunion arrived with perfect early summer weather. Grandma Elaine's sprawling Victorian home and gardens were ideal for such gatherings, with plenty of space for relatives to mingle on the manicured lawn. I had been helping her prepare for days, partly as a distraction from my anxiety about what was to come, and partly to ensure everything would go according to plan. Relatives began arriving around noon, aunts, uncles, cousins from both sides of the family. Many of them had heard rumors about the graduation dinner incident, and I could feel their curious glances as I helped serve drinks and appetizers. My father arrived with his new wife, Beth, both of them giving me supportive smiles as they entered. Diana arrived fashionably late, as was her habit, wearing an expensive-looking new dress and a confident smile. She acted as though nothing were amiss, greeting relatives warmly and accepting condolences from those who believed her version of events, that I was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding about money. Paige came separately, arriving just before the scheduled dinner. She looked uncomfortable, avoiding direct eye contact with me as she helped herself to a glass of wine. I had spoken to her briefly the day before, and while she wouldn't commit to supporting me publicly, she had promised not to contradict anything I said. It was a small concession, but an important one. Dinner was served buffet-style on the expansive patio, with tables scattered across the lawn. As dessert was being served, Grandma Elaine gently tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. The chatter died down as she stood, elegant and imposing despite her small stature. "Thank you all for coming today," she began warmly. "It means the world to have so many generations of our family gathered together." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "Many of you know that I've been thinking about my legacy recently, especially as I watch my brilliant granddaughter Isabella prepare for medical school." My mother straightened in her chair, her attention suddenly focused. I knew she was anticipating news about Grandma Elaine's estate plans, likely expecting to be named as a primary beneficiary. After much consideration and consultation with my attorneys, Grandma Elaine continued, "I've decided to make some significant changes to my estate planning. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of the Morgan Family Education Trust." Murmurs spread through the gathered family members. My mother's smile remained fixed, though her eyes betrayed her confusion. "This trust will provide substantial educational funding for members of our family for generations to come," Grandma explained. "College tuition, graduate studies, vocational training, all will be supported for any family member who wishes to further their education." She paused to take a sip of water, then continued. "The trust will be administered by Isabella, whose dedication to education and proven integrity make her the perfect choice to oversee these funds." The implications weren't immediately obvious to everyone, but Diana understood instantly. Her face paled as she realized what this meant. Elaine's substantial wealth would not be coming directly to her as an inheritance she could spend as she wished. Instead, it would be held in a trust specifically for educational purposes, administered by me. Additionally, Grandma Elaine went on, "I've decided to make another change effective immediately. I am signing over the deed to this house to Isabella today." Gasps and whispers erupted around the tables. This was unexpected even to me. We had discussed the trust, but Grandma had kept this particular detail secret until now. "Mom, you can't be serious," Diana interrupted, standing up abruptly. "We need to discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss, Diana," Grandma Elaine replied firmly. "My mind is made up. And since several people have asked why I'm making these changes, I think it's important to be transparent about my reasoning." What followed was a methodical, calm explanation of the recent events with misappropriated funds that had led to these decisions. Grandma Elaine detailed the checks she had sent for my education that had been intercepted and cashed, the false statements Diana had made to family members about my financial situation, and the pattern of financial exploitation that had come to light. The family gathering fell silent as the full picture emerged. Some relatives looked shocked, others nodded as though pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. My mother's face cycled through expressions of disbelief, anger, and finally desperate calculation. "This is ridiculous," she finally spluttered. "Mom is being manipulated by Isabella. She's always been jealous of the special relationship Paige and I have." Uncle Thomas spoke up then. "Diana, we've all seen the bank records. The checks were endorsed and deposited. Isabella never received that money while she was working 2 jobs to get through school." "I was going to pay it back," Diana insisted, her voice rising. "It was a loan. I needed it for household expenses." "We've seen the credit card statements too," I said quietly, speaking up for the first time. "The spa weekends, designer purchases, expensive restaurants, all charged within days of depositing checks meant for my education." All eyes turned to Paige, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. Under the weight of those stares, something in her seemed to break. "It's true," she said, tears streaming down her face. "All of it. Mom told me Grandma was playing favorites, that we deserved the money as much as Isabella did. I knew it was wrong, but I believed her when she said Isabella didn't really need it, that she was doing fine." Diana's face contorted with fury. "Paige, how dare you turn against me like this?" I'm not turning against you, Mom, Paige replied, wiping at her tears. I'm finally telling the truth. I can't live with this anymore. Isabella was eating ramen for dinner while we were using her money for manicures and shopping sprees. Diana looked around wildly, seeing the support she had counted on evaporating before her eyes. This is illegal, she sputtered, turning back to Grandma Elaine. You can't just change your will because of lies and exaggerations. I'll contest it in court. You're welcome to try, Mr. Patterson said calmly from where he sat nearby. But Mrs. Morgan is of sound mind and body, and her wishes are clearly documented. The trust is already established, and the deed transfer will be recorded tomorrow. Diana stormed off, shouting that we would all regret this, that families shouldn't treat each other this way. A few moments later, we heard her car screech out of the driveway. In the aftermath of her departure, something unexpected happened. Family members who had been distant or skeptical began approaching me with stories of their own. Times when Diana had borrowed money without repaying it, occasions when gifts meant for me had mysteriously disappeared, instances of manipulation and half-truths that suddenly made sense in context. Paige approached me hesitantly as the gathering began to disperse. I know it doesn't fix anything, she said, her voice thick with emotion, but I'm so sorry, Isabella. I was wrong, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. I didn't have an answer for her then. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. But for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in my sister's eyes, and it gave me hope that perhaps someday, some form of relationship might be salvaged from the wreckage of our family. 1 year after the dramatic family reunion, my life had transformed in ways I could never have anticipated. I was thriving in my first year of medical school, balancing the intense academic demands with a newfound sense of security and purpose. Instead of working exhausting part-time jobs, I could focus entirely on my studies, living in the comfortable guest house on Grandma Elaine's property. The Morgan Family Education Trust was already making a difference in the lives of my extended family. 2 of my cousins had started college with financial support from the trust, and another was attending vocational school to become an electrician. Managing the trust was a responsibility I took seriously, working closely with Mr. Patterson to ensure the funds were distributed fairly and appropriately. My mother's situation had changed dramatically as well. After burning bridges with virtually everyone in the family, she had been forced to accept financial reality. The new house she had been planning never materialized. Instead, she had to sell our family home to pay off accumulated debts and move across the country for a job in Arizona. Our contact was minimal, occasional text messages around holidays, nothing more. I had heard through family members that she was still insisting she had done nothing wrong, that she was the victim of a conspiracy between me and my grandmother. Paige's journey was more complex and, in many ways, more hopeful. After the family reunion, she had done serious soul-searching about her role in the deception. She had moved out of the apartment our mother had been helping pay for and found a smaller place she could afford on her own. She had taken a second job and begun making monthly payments to me, small amounts but consistent, as a way of trying to repay her portion of the misappropriated funds. Our relationship was slowly mending through joint counseling sessions. The sisterly bond had been severely damaged, but not irreparably broken. There were still awkward moments and painful conversations, but also glimpses of the closeness we had once shared. I let myself be manipulated because it was easier than standing up to Mom, Paige admitted during one particularly honest therapy session. I was jealous of your intelligence and Grandma's pride in you, and that made me vulnerable to Mom's narrative that we deserved compensation. My relationship with my father had strengthened considerably. After years of limited contact following the divorce, we now spoke weekly. He had been unwavering in his support through the entire ordeal, often reminding me that standing up for myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. Your mother always had a talent for rewriting reality to suit her needs, he told me during one of our dinner meetings. For years, I thought I was crazy for questioning where money was going. She made me believe I was the problem. The most profound healing, however, came through my relationship with Grandma Elaine. At 72, she was still sharp and energetic, but I was acutely aware that our time together was precious. I had moved into her guest house partly to be closer to medical school, but mostly to spend more time with her. We had dinner together several times a week, and I helped manage her medications and doctor appointments. You know, in a strange way, I'm grateful for what happened, she told me one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. Not the betrayal, of course, but for the way it brought us even closer. I understood what she meant. Through the pain and upheaval, I had gained clarity about what family truly meant. It wasn't simply shared DNA or obligation. It was honesty, support, and genuine care for one another's well-being. The experience had also shaped my approach to medicine. I had entered medical school with a new perspective on vulnerability and trust. I understood on a deep level how it felt to struggle silently while others assumed you were fine, and I was determined to bring that empathy to my future patients. As I approached the end of my first year of medical school, I found myself reflecting on how different my graduation would be from medical school compared to my undergraduate ceremony. Instead of a celebration built on hidden resentments and deceptions, it would be a genuine recognition of achievement, surrounded by people who had truly supported me along the way. The trust fund that Grandma Elaine had established had transformed not just my life, but the educational opportunities for our entire extended family. Recently, I had begun reviewing applications for the next round of educational scholarships as the trustee. It was deeply satisfying to help cousins and younger relatives pursue their dreams without the financial stress I had experienced. Most importantly, I had learned to set firm boundaries with my mother while leaving the door slightly open for eventual reconciliation. I no longer answered her manipulative texts or allowed her to make me question my own perceptions. When she reached out, I responded politely but briefly, without engaging in her attempts to rewrite history. Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to hurt you again, my therapist had explained. It means releasing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment while still protecting yourself from further harm. It was a difficult balance to maintain, but I was learning. The hurt would always be there, a scar rather than an open wound, but it no longer defined me or my relationships. One afternoon, as Grandma Elaine and I worked together in her garden, she paused and looked at me thoughtfully. You know, Isabella, my mother used to tell me that family legacy isn't about money or possessions. It's about values and how we treat each other. I think you understand that better than most. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Through all the pain and betrayal, I had discovered what truly mattered. Not the money that had been taken from me, but the strength I had found in standing up for myself and the genuine connections I had formed with those who truly cared about my well-being. As I look back on this journey, I'm amazed by how many of you have shared similar stories of family betrayal and healing. If you've experienced something like this, please know you're not alone, and that finding justice doesn't have to mean losing yourself to bitterness. Has anyone else discovered that family secrets led to unexpected strength or new beginnings? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more authentic family stories and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into, and I'm grateful you're part of mine.